Hello, welcome to Holistically Speaking. I'm Morella DeVoe, your host. Our mission, I almost jumped right in, and our mission at Holistically Speaking is to be the avenue through which the voices of holistic health reach you at the times you need it most. And that voice today is my friend and colleague, Bryn Perkins. And we're going to be talking about brain balancing. And I am just loving just sitting here and starting the conversation with you. And I'm very excited for what we're going to be learning about brain balancing, because it's something that I had never heard of. I'm sure people watching haven't heard of either. And I'm really looking forward to learning from you. So
Wonderful.
Thank you for
You're
joining
welcome.
me.
Thank you for having me today.
So brain balancing.
Yeah.
What is that?
What I do is actually called brainwave optimization, but the result is that we're doing work that is optimizing the brainwave patterns in the brain. The brainwave patterns are kind of a reflection of what's happening in the brain, so the brainwaves are one way that we can kind of see what's happening in the brain. A great way to tell you more about this is really to tell you about a friend of mine who called and was telling me that her son had had a bike accident.
Yeah.
And he was employed and not able to go to work. He couldn't use a register at his work, and he couldn't be around too much stimulation. His brain was kind of spacing out, and he wasn't able to really, he was considering, am I really able to work, or do I need to take a pause in my life and go home and recuperate? Yeah. Because when you have this kind of thing happen, the doctor will just say, yes, you've had a concussion and you need to go home and rest. There's nothing really to do for a brain injury, even if it's very mild and throws things off. So he came in to see me, and the first thing we did was sit down and do an assessment. And we go through all the lobes of the brain and are looking at the brain wave frequencies. And when we do that, we can see where things are in balance. So this brain needs to have basically a really healthy left-right balance and front-back balance. Okay. And so it's really clear when there's been a bonk to the head or a long-term physical or emotional trauma that has thrown the brainwave activity off. Yeah.
So knowing a little bit about your practice, because I know you used to be a nurse practitioner and you were doing biofeedback. You're a certified, is that what you're called?
Certified biofeedback
practitioner,
specialist.
Yeah. So you were doing all of these things, and yet you're now so excited about this brain balancing, brainwave optimization. Right. What led you to that? Because there must be a really good motivation behind that.
Well, it's a really good question. I mean, what I do when I work with people is I'm really looking for what it is that's going to heal them or make a difference in their life. What are the top priorities that we can do for somebody? When somebody comes to see me as a health consultant, and I've worked as a physician assistant, but now I'm really working one-on-one to address the individual's health concerns. And so I'm really open to what that should look like, what tools I can bring to the table for them to heal. And so when this came across my radar, I was really interested, because there's nothing really that can do that for people, for my clients that are dealing with long-term anxiety or the depression just kind of on the edge, or trying not to do the medication for insomnia. I'm always looking for what is it that's really going to get at the core of this problem. Yeah. And when you have long-term stressors, emotional stressors, they create patterns in our brainwave activity and impact how our brain functions. Yeah. And when that happens, we just don't feel balanced and well. And so that's how it came about. I was introduced to it and dove into it, and I'm really excited about it. It's what I do most in my practice right now.
So this leads me to ask you what sorts of things you can address with brainwave optimization, because it sounds like, okay, so maybe things that are related, like the bike accident, trauma to the head, or depression or insomnia, brain-related things. Is it just that, or tell us what are some of the things that you do?
It's so broad, because when we think about what we're talking about the brain, and the brain is the control center in the body. everything that happens in our body is controlled by the brain. So all of our hormonal function, our muscular activity, everything is controlled by. So if something is off in the body, it can really have its origins in the brain. So when I think about who is it good for, it's for anybody that needs to optimize their health or their well-being. Some people have had a concussion. It's really clear there's an imbalance. For other people, they've been living with a long-term imbalance in the nervous system that either leaves them in a fight or flight mode or leaves them in a freeze mode. And so some of these are things we just get used to, and we start identifying who we are with a certain behavior. And so a lot of what we're trying to do in our life, a lot of our imbalances are a result of just trying to balance the brain. Or another way of saying it, a lot of our addictions, of food addictions or alcohol or drug, are all an attempt to calm the brain down. And so a lot of times it's just in the process of balancing the brain that you run into these behaviors and symptoms.
Gotcha. And is it also perhaps like there are these loops or these programs that just keep running and running and running, and you know, is that a fair way of thinking about it?
It's just a pattern we get stuck in. And so brainwave optimization is an opportunity to bring balance to an imbalanced situation.
Gotcha. So how does this work? What happens when someone comes to your office?
So the first thing we do is do an assessment. And at the end of the assessment, I have a brain map, and I can talk to the individual about what's in the assessment. And so a lot of times people are really surprised to see that what we're looking at in these graphs and on paper correlate to their real life experience. And so a lot of people who come to see me, to back up to your previous question, which I didn't totally answer, it could be somebody who's had a concussion, but it could also be an athlete who's wanting to optimize their performance. So a lot of times athletes, because they are so vulnerable and their heads get bonked a lot, are prime candidates. But it can also be people who are dealing with long-term chronic emotional experiences, symptoms of anxiety, long-term stress. And then there's people who are just wanting to optimize their brain, because when the brain is optimized, when it's well balanced, then everything works better. I mean, people who are long-term meditators love this work because they can focus better and just get calmer. And that's what people notice after they've done the work.
So what does the assessment look like? Do you hook up people to
a
machine?
I do.
Okay.
The assessment is really attaching sensors, to all the lobes of the brain. So we go through the frontals, centrals, parietals, occipitals, temporals, and we get information. It's called an EEG, and that EEG is basically picking up data of the whole range of frequencies, and we're looking at balance between the left and the right and the front and the back, and balance and harmony within the lobe.
Okay. And so you get an assessment of that. It's a picture.
It's numbers. It's a lot of numbers, and I can put it into graph forms. So when I'm looking at this graph, we might just show the thing of the imbalanced brain. And
so if we could show our viewers the, there we go. That would be a picture of the assessment of an imbalanced brain.
That's right. That's an overall graph of probably one lobe, and you can see that there's a dominance on the right-hand side. And a lot of times that dominance, particularly in the temporal lobes, could tell me that they might be in a fight or flight state. So they could be dealing with anxiety, sleeplessness.
So so each one of those little lines tells you something specific about somebody's brain?
Yeah, that's kind of the frequency, that's the range of frequencies from low at the bottom to very high, from a 0 hertz to a 60, 64 hertz.
Okay. And so aside from it's more toward the right than
Yeah.
the left, you're
Yeah.
also reading into like the different little
That's
segments
right.
or
Exactly.
waves.
Exactly.
Gotcha. And then the next slide is this is what a balanced brain would look
Exactly.
like.
You can see that left to right looks really good. Low to high looks good. There's not something that is really screaming. You would look at that and go, okay, nice Christmas tree graph. You know, it's just
Right.
this.
So is this the illustration of someone after the brainwave optimization?
That's
Is
right.
it one session, multiple sessions, or what is that?
We do brainwave optimization as a series. So one of the things that makes this work unique is that it's done 10 series over the course of 5 to 10 days.
Oh,
so it's really a before and after. So this boy that came in, we did the assessment, we immediately started the work because it was really clear where the imbalance was. And so by day 3 or 4, he was starting to really notice, like he was feeling like he could actually be at work. He kind of wanted to rush things, so I really encouraged him to slow down, to get through all 10, to continue to do what his doctor was saying, which is give his brain a rest, eat really well, drink lots of fluids.
Right.
And over the course of 10 days, by the end of the 10 days, he was back at work full time, able to resume his responsibilities. And it was really a life changer. And that's what I find with this work, is that it's a real life changer.
So it's an intensive.
It's done as an intensive.
It's not a once a month.
No,
kind of,
that's right.
It's just for 5 or 10 days. Or
Exactly. You're doing it over the course of a very short period of time because, like, you know, you're creating new neural pathways. The brain, as we're discovering more and more, is the plasticity of the brain just means that it can change. It can create new neural networks so that it behaves in a new way and it holds a new pattern. Well, if you were to go learn something really new one day, the next day you might say, well, what was that piece of information that I'm trying to retrieve? But if you learned it every day for 10 days, if those lessons were reinforced for 10 days, then you would say, oh, I get it. And you would probably get it for the rest of your life. So it's a pattern that holds.
Interesting. And so what does each one of these sessions look like? Are you hooked up again?
That's right. Okay. You're hooked up again, or we decide, you know, I decide where we're going, where the greatest imbalances are. So I create a program specifically for you for that day, and it's progressive. So every day it's different, and every person it's different.
Gotcha.
So that's what's really cool about it. No two brains are the same, and there is no norm. In brainwave optimization, unlike in neurofeedback, we're not going towards a norm. We're saying your brain knows what balance is. And just like if you were to walk past a mirror and look in the mirror and you would see something, if something was in your teeth, you'd get it out and go on. That's biofeedback for you, that mirror. And this is what this work is. It's biofeedback for the brain. So it's basically the brain listening to itself, resonating with the dominant frequency in a specific range. And so somebody's sitting in the chair, we're talking to a certain part of the brain, and they're listening. And so in real time, you're listening to your brain, and the brain makes a correction.
So you mentioned this before we started the show, and you're saying it again, and immediately, as you say, listening, what I want to ask is, are they hearing something with their ears, or is it just the brain? So what are they hearing?
You're really hearing. You're hearing tones. You're hearing sounds. They're natural sounds, acoustic sounds, voice. All of the sounds have been, it's an algorithm that turns your brain waves into sound. It's an algorithm that was discovered, created, developed in the 90s, and it's turned into sound. So what you're listening to is your brainwave activity that's translated into sound. So it's, of course, different for everybody, but it's kind of like boom, 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 boom. And in that process, while they're listening and just lying back in a big comfy chair, I'm watching graphs and paying attention to what's going on in their brain. And what I often see is, you know, the two sides of the brain want to be like two little dolphins. They don't want to be totally in sync, but they want to be swimming together. And so when one side is doing something very different than the other side, that's an imbalance. And people are going to perceive that. And what I'm watching on the graphs is often, maybe one side split off from the other. And over the course of 8 minutes, these two sides coming together.
Wow.
It's like little miracles, little magic right before my eyes. But it's for individuals, what they're experiencing is just a very calm, peaceful, they're doing a guided visualization. And
Wonderful.
They're just relaxing in the chair. Each session is about an hour and a half to 2 hours. So they're just sitting and relaxing and healing during that time.
So an hour and a half to 2 hours for about 10 days, that's really an intensive.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's a commitment.
And I can see that, with something done so focused and concentrated, that you could see some significant results from before to after. So you've told us about head injuries, brain traumas, and one thing that you mentioned that I thought was really interesting was sports performance. How does that work? There's a story on your website that I think is really interesting of a man who did, oh my gosh, the Ironman.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yep, that's right.
And so how does it work that something like this would...
It's a really good question. I had my brother-in-law, I actually hooked up. And I said, wow, your brain looks pretty good. But we did a number of sessions. He came home one day and he said, my trainer and I both noticed today that I'm able to lift more weights. Now, this is a serious athlete. He knows exactly where he's at. He is like an Iron Man. And for him to come home and say, we don't know what happened, but all of a sudden, it took a jump. So, again, the brain is controlling everything.
Right.
And when the brain is optimized, it's like on a good day, you're just feeling right. When the brain is optimized, you really know it, and your body knows it, and it functions better.
Yeah.
Everything functions better when your brain is balanced.
I'm sure. So just imagining people at home listening and thinking, wow, what else might this help with?
Yeah.
Tell us what are some other things that people might be dealing with that they could come see you and maybe see how this could help.
Post-traumatic stress disorder is a really common one. Addictions, whether it's alcohol or food or drugs, is another really common one. Often the attempt there is just to balance the drain. You're kind of self-medicating, but it speaks to a brain imbalance. People who have had a trauma early in their life, who are just living with a higher level of anxiety and just feel like they can't quite shake something. So those are some good areas. Those are common areas.
And you also mentioned insomnia earlier.
Insomnia, yep.
As well.
This technology has been picked up by a neurologist at Wake Forest University, Dr. Tegler, and he's been doing research there, some significant research projects. And the first one was on insomnia. And they like to say if the results were any better, they would have been perfect. The results were great. And the second one was on migraines. They've also done PTSD and hormonal imbalances.
Wow, so migraines too, it's one of those that seems so elusive for so many people.
That's right.
There are lots of different approaches and techniques that work for some people, but some people just search for years. So
that's right. That's right. I've worked with people who have searched for years to solutions to their problems and are finding it through brainwave optimization. I've also worked with people who land in my office who don't know why they're there, but something's wrong and they don't know what it is. And so when we explore further, we often find that there was some type of brain trauma, a fall on the ice that they kind of looked over and forgot about, but things just aren't going so well anymore. So they're dealing with anxiety or irritability, and everybody around them is mad at them, and something's going on, but we're not sure what.
Something's off.
And so one woman came in with in that state, didn't know what was going on, but something was wrong. She thought about it, it was a fall on the ice. I told her exactly where I was seeing the imbalance. She did go in and have an MRI done, and sure enough, in that same area was a little fracture in her skull. So, sometimes it's like, I don't just get people after they figured out what's wrong and they come and want to solve it. But each person is different, and
Yeah.
each brain is different, so the results are very different for
Yeah.
everybody. I never know how long it's going to take for somebody.
Yeah. And how about kids with maybe learning difficulties
great
or
question.
homework difficulties, you
Yes.
know, that sort of thing?
Yes, it's a great question. I absolutely forgot about that. That's another segment of the population I've worked with. Yes,
Yeah.
you did. Working with kids that have ADD and ADHD and adults that have ADD and ADHD has been really one of the areas that I love working with, because a lot of times we just see the imbalance in those frontal lobes, that area of the brain where we really have to execute, and there's just too much information coming into that frontal area. And we find when we calm those lower frequencies in the front of the brain, that there's just more ability to focus.
Right, and a difficulty processing, so probably quieting things down.
That's right. One of my first clients that came in is now in high school, and we worked with her with her challenge and focus, and she is now on the honor roll in her high school, and she's really excited.
Wow.
So it's been very positive for her.
Oh, that's fantastic. So I was also thinking of people maybe feeling like they just can't focus at work, that they're just struggling with, getting things done. That could also be a good opportunity for them to come.
Absolutely. One of the things that this company has really helped to really clarify is that when we see brainwave imbalances on the right temporal area, it's often because we're in a fight or flight mode. And in this day and era, we're a lot of times just in that overwhelmed fight or flight mode. Well, we really want to be in that parasympathetic, resilient place and be able to move into that when we need to, but to come back. And so one of the things that I'm looking at in working in that region is that there be a left side dominance, that the little dolphin that's on the left side is a little higher than the right side, so that we have that resilience. And that's one of the things they found in working with monks really early on in this technology. They were wanting to see, how is a monk's brain different? And the way that it was different is, even though it responded to something, it moved back into that very resilient place very quickly.
Right.
And so we're coming from a more centered place rather than a harebrained place all the time.
Well, and it almost seems like in this day and age, people are constantly living in fight or flight in this kind of stressed state, but they're also addicted to it.
Right.
I hear of so many people saying, I can't get anything done unless my deadline is tomorrow or within an hour. Yeah. And so this is something that you can help.
Well, adrenaline really, there's nothing like adrenaline to focus that frontal lobe. And so, there's other ways to approach that in a more paced way. So absolutely.
So Bryn, tell us, you've already told us a bunch of different stories, but I'm just wanting to hear more. What's one of your favorite stories?
Well, one of my favorite stories is this teenage girl who came in for support with her schoolwork. And, as an aside, she had been having nonstop bleeding. She had been having her menses since September, and this was December. And she didn't come in for this. She wasn't thinking after the first 2 sessions, and she had done everything. She had tried everything. She had been on birth control pills. She had gone to acupuncture. She had tried a lot of different things, and nothing had stopped her menses. After the first day, the next day, her menses stopped. And she was a much happier girl coming in the rest of the week. Yeah, so that was really neat. And I love stories of one woman who has been coming to see me, who I just love, is a 70-year-old woman who had a brain trauma maybe 35 years ago and has lived with it for a long time. And she's been developing a little torticollis where she's pulling to the right side. And the last time she came in, she said that her PT can no longer find anything to do, that her neck is totally moving easy, and she has a greater balance in her visual field now. And she says, of all the things she's ever done for herself, this is the best thing. She says over and over, this is the best thing I've ever done for myself.
Wow.
So that's a pretty good story, too.
That is a really good story.
Coming from this woman.
And the thing that really impresses upon me just having several friends who have had traumatic brain injuries and how difficult it can be to recover from them years after the injury. It sounds like this is something that could really offer some hope, because
I think so. Yeah. Again, I never know what the outcome is going to be, and each person is different, but I have seen some real life changers with this technology. It's fun for me. I mean, I feel honored to be a part of this and to watch the unfolding and the changes that happen.
Well, this is so significant. I want to be sure to show our viewers how to find more information and know where to find you. So we have a slide where we can show your website. It's brainbalancingvt.com, and there's lots of stories there. Testimonials.
There's some testimonials there.
I had fun reading some of the testimonials. And then there's this website with lots more information, the developers of the brainwave optimization technique, and what Bryn does, it's brainstatetech.com. And what sort of information would you say that people can?
I love going there for the testimonials, because there's more testimonials from people from all over the country. I also like, under the resources section on the upper right-hand side, if there's a specific thing that you want to know more about, there's webinars, so you can listen to a webinar for an hour by the man Lee Gerdes, who has created this technology.
And on the next page, we have this book that you suggest, The Limitless You, The Infinite Possibilities of a Balanced Brain, by Lee, is it Gerdes?
That's right.
So he's the founder of the Brain State Technologies company.
Yes, he developed this technology after having post-traumatic stress after being assaulted by 4 youths inner city, and he was dealing with anger and insomnia, and did everything and decided there has to be a better way, and developed this technology.
Wow, it has been so interesting to hear about all of the different stories and the testimonials, and it sounds really intriguing. It's the sort of thing that I say, I need to come see you.
Come in for an assessment.
I need to come see you. I could definitely use help with the fitness, with the brain, the focusing. Really incredible work that you're doing. So thank you so much for joining us and bringing this to us. I hope a lot of people have watched this.
I hope so too.
And because it just sounds really, really life-changing.
It is. Well, thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And thank you so much for joining us. It has been a pleasure bringing something completely new to you, because I hadn't even heard about this. Again, if you have any suggestions or questions, please email me, and I'd be happy to bring a different practitioner and address some topics that might interest you. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.